One of the biggest changes in video games over the past 15 years has been the rise of indie games. While independently developed games were made in the past, video game publishing and tools made it so that it was difficult to create a game without a lot of financial backing. That's changed. It's now easier than ever to make an indie game, but because it's easier, that means that it's harder for any one indie game to stick out from the pack. Just look at the increase in games launching on Steam over the years. How are you supposed to succeed when 10,000 games are released in 2020 alone? The answer is complicated and mostly involves marketing, but it boils down to this: you've got to have something special. Whether it's a great aesthetic that makes the game stand out, or compelling gameplay that makes people want to play it again and again, the indie games that impress are the ones that, thanks to their strong design, demand attention. And fortunately for us, there's a lot of indie games that fit that purview. So today, let's celebrate the indie games that captivated us, that made us want to shout about them from the rooftops, that made us annoy our friends when we wouldn't shut up about them. Let's not waste any more time, because we have a lot of great games to talk about. I'm Caboose with the Leaderboard, and these are 15 indie games that blew our minds.
You remember our venerable house? Opulent and imperial, gazing proudly from its stoic perch above the moor.
The first entry on our list is Darkest Dungeon, a game that is cruel, unrelenting, and addicting to play. You play as someone who has inherited a vast estate from their ancestor, only to find out that said ancestor has unleashed evil upon the land. You have to hire motley crews of adventurers and outcasts who explore the manor and its ground piece by piece to find the monsters within. That is easier said than done, as said creatures hit hard, both in terms of health and damage to your party's sanity. It is extremely easy to be overwhelmed by the things you fight, and it won't be long before every party member has a host of mental conditions and diseases that affect their capabilities. Yet despite all the horrors and trials you face, Darkest Dungeon makes you constantly want to delve into its dungeons again and again. It's a modern version of old school dungeon crawlers, backing its difficulty with diverse characters and abilities, a gorgeous art style, and one damn good narrator. It's a game of tactics, management, and relying on what little luck you have in order to beat the overwhelming odds.
This is the story of a man named Stanley. Stanley worked for a company in a big building where he was employee number 427. Employee number 427's job was simple. He sat at his desk in room 427 and he pushed buttons on a keyboard.
Coming in at number 14, we have the Stanley Parable. Originally born out of a mod for Half-Life 2, it is a game where you play as an office worker named Stanley who finds all of his coworkers missing. You walk around a giant office building, and that's pretty much it. Oh yeah, and you occasionally push buttons and open doors. That sounds bland, and it would be, were it not for the game's narrator. You see, every action you take is narrated by an omniscient person who describes what is happening and what is about to happen. What makes the Stanley Parable so interesting is that you can ignore the narrator and derail the story at any moment. Follow the narrator and you'll become pleased at Stanley's choices. But if the voice tells you to go left, go right and listen as the narrator tries to get the story back on track. The more you ignore him, the more surreal and strange the room and narration gets. There are several endings to discover, all of which are stranger than the last. The Stanley Parable is a commentary at large on the kinds of choices we have in video games, but due to the absurdity of the situations you find yourself in, it never gets boring. Instead, it pushes you to explore the never-ending corridors just to see how off track you can get. Hotline Miami lands at number 13 and is probably going to be the most brutal game on the list. Set in a neon-soaked 1989 Miami, in an alternate reality, you play as a maniac who receives coded messages telling him to murder everyone at certain locations. And I mean murder in the most gruesome way, as you make use of a variety of melee weapons and guns in order to get the job done. Luckily for you, nearly every enemy in the game dies in one hit from any weapon. Unfortunately, the same rule applies to you. That means you have to die again and again in order to understand enemy behavior and plan your trips through each level in order to take out every enemy in one go. The result is a symphony of violence that makes you look like one of the most dangerous human beings alive, which isn't far from the mark. Its simple controls, psychedelic visuals, and surprisingly intriguing story make Hotline Miami a blast to play, but the real star of the show is the soundtrack. Even though it's been 9 years since the game's release, its music still feels fresh and electric all these years later. Number 12 is a game that has terrified players across the globe for over a decade, Amnesia: The Dark Descent. Arguably the most influential indie horror game ever made, Amnesia places you in the shoes of a man named Daniel. He's trapped in a castle, has lost most of his memories, and is trying to discover who he was while evading horrific monsters. Because that's what you're going to do throughout the entire game, as Daniel has no way to fight back against enemies. Every time you see a monster, you have to run and hide from them in the darkness, but staying too long in the dark will cause Daniel to lose his mind. The interplay between hiding, running, as well as puzzle solving makes for a tense experience that never lets up throughout the game's runtime. More than just being a scary indie game, Amnesia may well be one of the scariest video games ever made, period. It induces terror like few other games do, and its simple controls mean that you have to use everything at your disposal to steel yourself and evade the monsters waiting in the dark. Just don't play the game with the lights off, alright? Let's now move on to a different kind of horror, namely the horror of having to plan out your moves several turns ahead. That's the case for Into the Breach, a turn-based strategy game that takes our 11th spot. In the future, humanity is being attacked by giant aliens. To combat them, you select from teams of giant mechs in order to defeat the aliens and protect cities. The gimmick is that you can see how each enemy will attack in any given turn, meaning you can come up with a strategy to minimize the amount of damage dished out each turn. There are tons of different mech types, each of which can be equipped with dozens of different weapons and upgrades that can change how you approach each battle. Some weapons fire in a straight line, while others knock enemies back. There's a huge number of choices to make, ensuring that each playthrough feels fresh. And should you happen to fail in protecting humanity, all is not lost. You can still send one pilot back in time and retain all of their experience to start a new defense with some enhanced abilities. Simple to play, hard to master, and incredibly fun no matter how many hours you've put into it. Into the Breach is one of the best strategy games of the past decade. Yes, we know Rocket League is owned by Epic Games now and is no longer indie, but once upon a time, it was an indie game, and we have to recognize that with a spot at number 10 on our list. Soccer with cars is the cliche to describe Rocket League, but it's fitting. Teams ranging 1 to 4 players essentially play football against each other using high-speed cars. Nitrous can be used for a boost, but the cars can also jump and fly through the air to hit the ball from high above. And I can totally do that. I can't do that because I suck at Rocket League, but props to those who can. It's such a simple game, both in its controls and in its premise. Is there any wonder why it became such a big hit? There are several other game modes for Rocket League, but the elegance of its initial mode remains the one to beat. It is electrifying, combining some of the best parts of both sports and racing games to create something that is a revolution. Sure, it might be owned by Epic now, and there may have been several controversies regarding its loot system over the year, but at its core, Rocket League is still incredible to play and has one of the biggest esports scene around. Moving away from the double digits, we have Dead Cells landing at number 9. It's a combination of the roguelike and Metroidvania genres. In other words, you get the procedurally generated worlds of roguelikes coupled with the action and exploration of a Metroid or Castlevania game. The story is minimally told, but in short, you are a prisoner who is a mysterious massive sludge that possesses dead bodies to try and escape an island. And there are a ton of weapons, items, and upgrades to use in order to complete that mission. But despite the variety in items, all of them feel good to use thanks to some of the best controls found in any roguelike. Movement is tight, dodging is satisfying, and fighting enemies both big and small never loses its impact. Dead Cells is simply great to play. It's challenging, but it's a learning curve that's not so steep as to be a turnoff. After a few hours, you'll be gliding through Dead Cells ready to take on whatever challenges lie on the other side of each new area. With great combat and eye-catching pixel arts, Dead Cells is a roguelike you don't want to miss. If we're talking about classic indie games, few match the acclaim that Limbo gathered when it released back in 2010, but it's not just the acclaim that causes it to take the number 8 spot. Limbo is a fantastic, atmospheric puzzle game. Playing as a boy searching for his sister, you wander through dark and oppressive environments, solving a variety of puzzles along the way. You can move left and right, jump and climb ladders, and push and pull objects. That's common in any platformer, but Limbo uses these basic controls to great effect. You will grab corpses to use as weights, run from a giant spider thing that will tear you apart should you get grabbed by it, evade oppressive machinery that runs uncaringly in an abandoned factory. The world, backed by simple black and white visuals, makes Limbo all the more haunting. And it's a journey that doesn't overstay its welcome, wrapping up in a crisp 5 hours at most. Short as it may be, that time leaves more of an impact on the player than many AAA games that are dozens of hours long. Limbo is well crafted and harrowing to play, and if you haven't already, you should go and check it out.
Super hot. Super hot.
Want to play a super inventive first-person shooter? Well then, look no further than Superhot, which lands at number 7. The premise is simple. You load into a minimalistic level with simple polygonal graphics, and you have to kill every enemy without dying. But the enemies only move when you move, making the game more akin to a puzzle game rather than a traditional first-person shooter. This means that you'll be taking your time dodging bullets and thinking about what your next move is going to be. You'll be grabbing pipes to bash enemies' heads in, quickly uppercutting enemies to disarm them, and shooting a lot of people in quick succession. But if you ask me, the most satisfying move in Superhot is throwing a gun at an enemy in order to take their gun and shoot them with it. Superhot makes you feel like Neo in The Matrix or John Wick in, John Wick. In other words, you'll feel like Keanu Reeves while playing this game. And if that's not a ringing endorsement, I don't know what is.
Ooh, no. I don't like that. Okay, I saw a little trick somebody showed me. Bah.
Don't hate the player, hate the game. Iced tea.
Iced tea?
We're almost at the top 5, but before we get there, let's talk about one of the most frustrating games ever made. Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy. Pardon my language, but f*** this game. All you have to do is get to the top of the game's mountain while being a man in a bucket with a hammer. You can only use your mouse to control the hammer, relying on momentum, positioning, and plenty of patience to climb your way to victory. To those who play it, let me wish you good luck, because this game is going to test you. One wrong move can send you tumbling down all the way back to the bottom, destroying hours of progress. This is made worse by the fact that there is a sarcastic narrator who kind of encourages you every time you make a mistake, which, oh boy, it makes it all the more infuriating. But when you nail a difficult jump to reach an entirely new area of the mountain, the sense of accomplishment you feel is profound. We hate this game, but we love it in the same breath, because the emotions you experience when playing Getting Over It make for one of the most memorable indie games around, and for that, it lands at number 6.
Hi, I'm Toby Fox, creator of Undertale.
We finally hit our top 5, and what game could kick it off besides Toby Fox's indie RPG, Undertale? Well, actually a lot of games could kick off the top 5, we just chose Undertale because this is our list, so if you're unhappy with this choice, it's okay, just make your own. Anyway, Undertale is a game about a young child falling into the underground, a world populated by monsters. There, they explore the realms and try to figure out a way to escape. Along the way, they encounter a colorful cast of characters who hinder or help the child in their search. That's a very basic overview of the plot, which we won't go into just in case it hasn't been spoiled for you. While battles are turn-based and feature a bullet dodging minigame for attacks, the most important features in combat is that you don't have to kill enemies. You can befriend them, and choosing whether or not to fight plays directly into the story, with your choices influencing other characters and the ending. But as a whole, Undertale is a charming game that uses simple graphics and a truly great soundtrack to tell a heartfelt story. The interplay between the game's mechanics and themes is amazing, and remains compelling all these years later. Just don't go looking up the game, because it deserves to be played with as few expectations as possible. Stardew Valley is the best Harvest Moon game ever made. This quaint and heartwarming farmer simulator takes the number 4 spot on our list for good reason. You play as a new transplant to Pelican Tower after your grandfather gives you a plot of land. You'll slowly build up a farm, growing and raising animals, while growing closer to the residents of the nearby town. You'll fish, fight monsters, engage in civic activities, and eventually may even find love and marry one of the town's citizens. The open-ended gameplay means you can explore the world and do whatever you want at your own pace. Want to devote yourself to growing tomatoes? Go ahead. Want to spend all day fishing on the shoreline? Sounds like a plan. Want to descend into a cave to fight monsters and mine minerals? You do you. The point is, Stardew Valley is relaxing and peaceful. The animations are crisp, the townsfolk's storyline is surprisingly deep, and there's always something new to explore or secrets to uncover. There's no other game on our list that is as wholesome and calming as Stardew Valley. Let's not mince words with number 3. Disco Elysium is the best role-playing game in recent memory. Set in the fantasy realist world of Elysium, you play as a detective in the city of Revachol. I think I'm saying that right. You went on a bender over the past few days, and you've lost most of your memories. That doesn't prevent you from doing your job, as there is a murder that needs to be solved. You're still hungover when the game starts, so good luck with that. What makes Disco Elysium so captivating is that your stats are represented by voices in your head. They are your internal monologue that encourages and shames you into taking certain actions, though it's your choice which ones you make. And the stronger a skill is, the more damaging it can be, meaning that you have to assess whether a better chance to pass skill checks is worth suffering through the consequences. And then there's the city of Revachol itself, which is caught in the grip of a multitude of political forces that have left lasting consequences on both the city and its residents. The quality of the writing is unparalleled, and the huge number of choices that you can make allow for a freedom that is rarely matched in RPGs, including big budget ones. There's no other game quite like Disco Elysium, and it's a must play for anyone who wants to sink their teeth into one of the most compelling indie games around. And the runner-up on our list at number 2, we got Return of the Obradin, an adventure puzzle game that tests your skills in deduction. You were tasked with determining what happened to the people on board the East India Trading Company ship Obradin in 1803. To do that, you have a book that keeps track of various facts, as well as a magical pocket watch that lets you hear and see the moment in which a person on board the ship had died. With these tools, you have to figure out the fates of all 60 souls on the Obradin. The game is effectively one giant puzzle, as you have to go to different moments of death in order to deduce a person's name, rank, and cause of death. If you correctly guess 3 fates, progress is filled in on the book, but it'll make you work for those deductions, and the feeling you get when you make a logical connection is wonderful. The graphics mimic early computer games, and though there are only a few animations, that does not stop the game from looking gorgeous. With a great mystery and even better puzzle design, Return of the Obradin is a special game that is easily the runner-up on the list. And yet number 1 is special both in gameplay and the fact that it came out just last year. Supergiant made their best game to date with 2020's Hades. Using Greek mythology as its backdrop, you play as Zagreus, the son of Hades, who is attempting to escape his father's realm. Because Zag is immortal, he will return to his father's palace every time he dies. And that'll happen a lot, since Hades is populated by powerful souls and characters that will do everything in their ability to stop them. Beyond having great writing, atmosphere, and music, as is common for titles made by Supergiant Games, Hades excels due to how simple yet complex its gameplay is. You choose one of 6 different weapons, each of which have modifiers that change the weapon's abilities in each run. Plus, you can acquire weapon upgrades and boons from the Greek gods that further enhance your playstyle. Take it all together and you can create vastly different builds not only between each weapon, but within each weapon as well. The massive number of weapon permutations, alongside the upgrades Zag can acquire and the trinkets he can equip to modify his powers further, means that no 2 escape attempts are the same. Hades is fantastic to play and is both one of the best indie games and best action games we've ever played. And there you have it. That's all for our list of the top 15 indie games that blew blew our minds. If you enjoyed our picks, like and subscribe for more videos like this. And because we left so many games on the cutting room floor, share your favorite indie games in the comments section below. I've been Caboose with the Leaderboard, and we'll see you next time.